So, officially, welcome to this town hall conversation from Messy Church USA. We're so glad you were able to join us today. This is something that we try to do several times a year, where we have just a time to get together and share ideas and get the collective wisdom from everyone. So, today, our focus is about restarting our how do you restart in-person Messy Church. Some of you may have already restarted, and so we want to hear your experience too. So again, if you'd like to put in chat your name and where you're from, and if you've been doing Messy Church, that just sort of helps us know who is part of our conversation today. So I'm Roberta. I am the Executive Director of Messy Church USA, and I've been involved with Messy Church since about 2013. And I got a Facebook post yesterday that was it was 5 years ago yesterday that I met 3 other people from the United States who were doing Messy Church. We met in England, and it was at that event in England that we got to know one another, and we started talking about how can we be supportive for Messy Church here in the USA. So that's what brought me to where I am today. I am so happy to introduce to you our 2 main presenters today. We're going to have, after we have a prayer that Johanna Myers is leading. She's our assistant. I almost said you were the executive director, Johanna. Johanna is our assistant, associate or assistant executive director. And she's from South Carolina. So it's sort of nice. We have one person from the West Coast and one person from the East Coast on our leadership team. She's going to lead us in prayer. And then Dr. Jillian Mayer is going to share her experience. She is the Director of Christian and Faith Formation at St. Paul's United Church of Christ. And is it Waterloo, Illinois? It's just right across from St. Louis, she tells us, in Illinois. So it's the southern part of Illinois. They've been doing Messy Church for 6 years at her church. She has 3 children. She has twin girls who are 11, and then a 7-year-old daughter also. So she goes by Jill. So Jill or Jillian, you can choose. But she's going to share with us first in just a little bit. And then our second presenter is Rebecca Leibowitz, who is the Children and Youth Director at Saint James United Methodist Church in Kingston, New York. So they've been doing Messy Church. They actually started with something before they knew about Messy Church. They were doing a Saturday morning, what they called waffle church. They would get together and have waffles, and then they would do some activities and story time. Bible story time. And then when they became aware of Messy Church, they had a Messy Church training a couple of years ago that Julie Heinz did for them in New York. And then they became part of the Messy Church network. So we're really glad that she's here with us. Rebecca is also a registered nurse. So you'll notice in her presentation, she brings some of that background with her. So that's great. She has 3 children, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 16-year-old. So we're really glad that, a 6-year-old, sorry, not 16, 12, 10, and 6. So again, we're very happy to have her with us. After Johanna leads us in prayer, Jill's going to share her experience. They've started Messy Church back up in person in Illinois, and then had to shut back down, and then started back in person again. And then we'll have time for question and answer after Jill presents, and then Rebecca will be sharing from her experience. They have not started meeting in person yet, but she's been doing a lot of research about that. And then we'll have a time of question and answer. At the end of the presentation, I'll be sending you, Rebecca's using a PowerPoint, and I'll be sending you the PDF for that, so you don't have to worry about writing down notes because you'll get that. And I'll also be sending you a few other things that I'll tell you about at the end of our session. So again, welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you could stay muted until it's time to open up for the question and answer, that just helps a bit. And sometimes if you put it on the speaker view, especially when we have the PowerPoint up, that actually helps also. So, Johanna.
Let's pray together. God, thank you for this chance to gather. This last year has been a lot of decisions that we've had to make, a lot of worry, a lot of grief, a lot of unknown. And now we are excited to think about new beginnings, but we are also nervous, and there is still so much unknown. So be with us, God. May our plans be creative. May we focus on welcoming all people to Messy Church. May we embrace all ages as we figure out new ways to be Messy Church together, as we celebrate and we give thanks for you. It's in the name of Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So I guess I'm up. So yes, I'm Jill. You can just call me Jill, although I'll go by Jillian. So to begin, I obviously didn't prepare a PowerPoint or anything. I just kind of want to walk through the evolution of us returning. And it's very, I guess I really shouldn't say evolution, because it really, as Roberta hinted, like we opened back up, we closed back down. We've definitely evolved a lot throughout the pandemic and dealing with all of the mitigation strategies and what was going on at the local and state level. So before I get into that, my biggest takeaway I want you to take from my experience is to keep it as simple as possible. And you'll see that definitely highlighted as I go through all the different steps that we've taken at St. Paul's to bring Messy Church back. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. I think Illinois locked down a week before like our Messy Church was scheduled it would have been last March. So that didn't happen. And actually I still have all the supplies in my office for that Messy Church. I'll do it eventually. We didn't really do anything because we were all just trying to figure out. But from April on, I was like, well, we'll do messy at home stuff. And so I began assembling kits, keeping it simple. So the activities got a lot simpler. There were fewer activities, but providing all the supplies needed. And then I'd record kind of little messages and celebration and devotionals and a whole, I don't know. I did that from April until September. And in September, we were in a place where we could start meeting in larger groups. Another piece of advice is to know your space. And I know Rebecca's going to go into this a little bit with the questions that she's asking in regards to what space do we have? How can we use it? I am blessed to have a church that has a really large fellowship hall that I think the fire capacity is 350. So it's a huge space. We've got round tables and long tables, and we're blessed with a great space. And so I was like, okay, I've got a spatial that I can spread people out, get families apart. Let's start trying to figure out how we can all come back together again. And it's going to look a lot different, but I don't know, it worked and it was amazing. That first one in September, require pre-registration when you're first going back is something that I highly recommend, just so you can make sure that you know who's going to be there and you know how you can set up the space to where everyone can be as distant as they need to be. There are definitely ways to get around this, because I'm going to backtrack and actually, so our first official Messy Church back at church was in September. However, in August, I hosted a Messy Family Olympics out at a farm that our church owns. See, I'm very blessed. Our church has lots of space. So we all went out to the farm. That didn't require advanced registration because I knew there was going to be plenty of land where I could spread people out. So use the space you have, but do require pre-registration, especially when you're getting your feet back in the water. And this really helps a lot with the meal aspect. So when I say keep it simple, you want to stay as you need to keep the aspects of messy church that make it a messy church. And so hospitality is one of those. Eating together is a big part of that. And I knew I couldn't lose this. I could lose other things, but we couldn't lose the eating together component. So we kept it really simple that first month. And when I had families pre-register, and we use Sign Up Genius, that's just what our church uses to sign up, I had them tell me what kind of pizza they liked. And when the families that registered showed up on that Wednesday evening, they were greeted with directions, just go find your name on a table. And on the table were plates, bottles of water with water flavoring, utensils, napkins, everything that they could possibly need for their meal, along with the pizzas that I had ordered for them. So the first couple meals that we shared together at Messy Church were just Pizza Hut or Papa John's. I was mentioning to someone, definitely check with local pizza places. A lot of them will give you really great deals. Our local Papa John's, for any nonprofit youth type thing, will give us $5 pizzas. And so it's a good way to keep the budget low when you're having to keep food separated. So we had pizza on the table, and then also on the table were all of the supplies needed for the Messy Church activities of the day. They were very similar to the at-home kits, and in fact, I continue to create at-home kits that I have available outside our church office for families that might not be able to make it to our in-person Messy Church, or maybe they're not comfortable coming to the in-person church or Messy Church. So all the supplies are in this bin, and then I kind of stand afar and talk into a microphone and welcome everyone, and then just say, okay, get eating and then get crafting. And then I'll lead a short celebration at the end. The number of activities is typically 4 to 6, we'll say, which is less than my usual Messy Church. We're keeping it simple. They are a lot less messy, which my custodian really appreciates. And even maybe some of the parents appreciate, because they're the ones that would have to be dealing with the glitter cleanup if they were super messy. Although I will say I'm looking forward to the day when I can be sweeping glitter up off the floor. So that's kind of how we brought it back. It has definitely evolved. So we were able to meet September and October together. In November, we had to kind of close down again for in-person meetings, just because numbers were going up. And then we returned again in February for in-person again, and we've kind of built it, and it's evolved as we've gone. So at our last meeting, I was able to have 2 stations that were separate, and then I just requested that families don't go to that station. We were potting plants at one, and it's a lot simpler just to have a potting station. So families were really great about waiting until another family had left that station. And so there were 2 stations that were separate that they went to, and then I think there were 3 activities on their table that they completed together as a family. And that is really the bare bones of it. It continues to evolve. I'm excited to hopefully be using some outdoor spaces this summer, because I know a lot of families are more comfortable. One of the interesting things I found is in our discussions, especially with the recent mask guidelines, is that children can't be vaccinated. So a lot of our people can't. So it's a different conversation we're having. Yeah. So that is, I guess, the core of it. Definitely, if you have any questions, I know I'm missing probably very valuable information, or maybe not valuable information. But if you have any questions about, what it's kind of look like, I have been able to use, I use the Get Messy magazine. I've just picked the activities that I could get supplies easiest for, that I could equip people more. Yeah. So I guess now's the Q&A portion of one of the Q&A portion.
Great. Thank you, Jill. B asked a question about, is this more about starting or restarting? Today is more about for churches that have been doing Messy Church, but maybe haven't been doing it in person. We do have a online webinar coming up June 26th about how do you go about getting started with Messy Church? I think though this should be helpful to you, even if you're new to Messy Church, just to sort of hear. But that's why I wrote down that Jill's Messy Church starts with the meal, then goes to activities, and then goes to celebration. That's the way they've always done it. And other Messy churches are do it differently than that. So that's part of what that is. So if you do have any specific questions about Messy Church itself, put them in the chat and Johanna and I can respond to them. But let's take a moment just to see if there's any questions that you'd like to ask Jill specifically. Jill, there's a question from Rebecca. Did you find that your attendance is similar to what it was in the past, or has it changed?
It is lower, which is as expected. And actually, when we first came back, we were limited to about 25 individuals. So that's like 5 families. I think it was 5 families. I've gradually increased. We're up to like 40, although I'm pretty sure I could go up higher now. Before we'd usually have like 60. That being said, we've had some families just really weren't comfortable with it, which is completely understandable. I'm hoping we'll get back to our 60. But yeah, no, definitely you're going to expect, depending on the number you have and the number or the amount of space you have, it's going to be like, you hate to turn people away, but you might have to. And it's a question of safety and just comfort, because I would hate for a family to come and then feel really unsafe if they were surrounded by a lot of people, which is one reason part of me really hated having pre-registration, because I feel like pre-registration just knocks people out, because people forget to register and then they feel like they can't come. And I don't know, I never want to say no to someone. I don't want to turn people away, but I don't know, I felt like it was really important. So I could say, well, there are not, like, it's going to be safe. You're not going to get here and ever feel unsafe. That was my goal. And really kind of what guided all the decisions I made when we were starting. And so I don't know, luckily I haven't had to say no yet. We've always managed to stay below.
Jillian, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. We had a question about your mask policy, and how do you anticipate, like, it's hard to know what's going to happen in the fall. I'm in the same position. Like, I have no idea what the fall is going to look like. But even when you are indoors, since kids aren't being vaccinated, what do you anticipate about like mask wearing, at least at St. Paul's?
No, we actually talked at length about this at a staff meeting this morning, because I said this is more limbo than we need right now, because we have a playground in our sanctuary, and I'm very like, kids can't be vaccinated, so anyone near the playground needs to wear a mask, even if they have been vaccinated. So in worship, we're strongly encouraging everyone to wear a mask. At Messy Church, I'm going to require a mask. Half of our population, if not more, is not eligible to be vaccinated, or maybe parents are not choosing to have them vaccinated. So feeling safe is a big thing, and if I don't require a mask, I know that some people wouldn't feel safe enough to come. So I'm planning on requiring masks, and I'm well aware that so I'm in Illinois, which is a blue state, but I live in a very red county, that I know that there's going to be pushback from possibly some families that they don't want to wear them. They're vaccinated. The government's told them they don't have to wear them, but I'm planning on requiring them, if only so everyone is kind of the same, because it's not an issue of fairness necessarily, but it's hard to ask kids to wear a mask if you're not asking adults to wear a mask as well, even if adults have been vaccinated and they haven't. And I'm mostly expecting that most parents will understand that and be willing to model the behavior that they want their kids to exhibit. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Thanks.
There's another question about doing the craft. Did you explain each craft and then do them together at separate tables? Did you explain the craft and then had them do it at everyone's doing it at their own table at the same time? Is that the question, Stacy? Did I get that right? Okay.
Stacy, I didn't explain that at all. So in my at-home kits, there's a packet that has like all the instructions with for all the different activities. So the 4 to 6 different activities, just like regular Messy Church or more normal Messy Church. Activities were very self-paced at all the ones we've held. So usually before, when it seems like most people are getting close to being done eating, I would go up front and say, okay, so it looks like everyone's getting close to finishing eating. If you're not, keep eating, no worries. And I would just do a brief talk through of each of the activities. I wouldn't work on it, but I would say, so one of your activities is to create this for Lent. We did a Lenten prayer bottle. So one of your activities is a Lenten prayer bottle. You've got rice and bottles on your table. You're going to put them together. Make sure to read through it together, and then I'd move on to the next activity. So I kind of outline all of the activities at the beginning, and then I would just turn them kind of loose. And I would try to, especially once we were all getting more comfortable and everyone was wearing their mask, I would usually kind of walk around the periphery and make sure, check in and say hi, because that's honestly the thing that you miss the most about Messy Church, is the ability for families to connect and for you to connect with the families. And so I would try to kind of walk around, and maybe if they needed help with something, help them. Although the crafts tend to be pretty simple, didn't usually need much help.
So I'm assuming you're using fewer volunteers at this point, just from kind of listening to you talk, and that's been a question that's been asked as well.
Yes. Well, actually, no. The answer is no, because I'm pretty much the only volunteer for the most part, most weeks. Occasionally, so the answer is yes, because a lot of times I would pull out of my youth group and have my youth group help lead stations and help do things. I'm full time at my church, so I don't know, I feel like the expectation has always kind of been on me that I'm going to coordinate everything. So I'm the one that runs the kitchen. I'm the one that sets everything up. And so that hasn't changed. But yeah, I'm missing the youth group component. Although that being said, I've started inviting youth group members back. And so like at the one where I had the 2 stations set up, I did have youth group members that kind of stood off to the side and helped if needed. I will say one of the, I don't know, it's dual-sided. So I love the connections that families will form, because like I've had other volunteers take my own kids and like help them, or other families take my kids, and you see these relationships forming. But I've seen so much really interesting intergenerational stuff within families that before might have like all the 8-year-olds would kind of want to go together, and you might have one parent that kind of follows along. This way, families all really stick together. And so it's really been fun seeing the families interact, and maybe pulling some of the adults in that in the past might just send their kids on their way. And I've tried to have more activities that adults might enjoy. So like writing thank you cards to a teacher or a mailman or whatever. And so I've had a lot more adult involvement with the actual like faith building activities, which is a bonus too.
There was a question about the celebration at tables. Are you doing right now? You're doing your celebration at tables. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we began like everyone stayed exactly at their tables. This is a time to point out, we really don't use music, but we never had a huge music component. So I know that that's something Rebecca's going to kind of talk about, which wasn't too much of a concern for me. I just eliminated it because I didn't want to have to wrap my head around all of that. As we've evolved, I've started having youth come up or children come up and like lead our grace. I'll just have them come up, they wear their mask around the microphone, then they go back to their table. I haven't gone to a full scale like celebration where I might have a instant drama or something for them to act out yet. So right now they're still at tables. I'm hoping that we'll soon be able to get to the point where we're, I don't know, have a much more elaborate celebration.
Great, thank you. There's a couple of other questions, but I think we want to move on to make sure that Rebecca gets time for her presentation. And then again, I just want to mention, this is Messy Church USA. This isn't something we want to tell you what to do. You really have to think about your area, your context, because everything is different. We're actually from 26 different churches today from 18 different states that signed up for this webinar. So it really depends on your context. So you need to follow your guidelines from your denomination. We're from 6 different denominations, from your denomination and from your local area. This is just sort of, we don't want to say this is what you can do and can't do, but we wanted this to be a way to sort of think through things. So there's like questions about sanitation stations and things like that. I think that's great ideas. I think you should probably have Purell out, but we're not going to mandate that if you're doing a messy church, that's what you have to do. You have to do those things. So I want to thanks, Jill. That was very, very helpful. And obviously you got a lot of questions going on that, and we'll continue to, you can continue to put your questions in. Maybe Jill has a chance to look at it now too. So we are going on to Rebecca. So thank you. And Rebecca is going to be sharing a PowerPoint. As I said, I will be sending this out to you later so that you can, you don't have to write down everything that she has in her PowerPoint. So.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm really glad to meet you all and to share some ideas and resources that might help you as you're thinking through what you want your messy church to be like when it resumes. As Roberta said, my background is I was a registered nurse. I'm not practicing, but it definitely affects how I think and how I problem solve. I love the health sciences and I love to do my research. And I also really love music. So there's that background. This PowerPoint will be sent out to you. So as Roberta said, don't worry about taking notes. There are links in it that you may want to explore on your own later on. So just a little bit of background about me. I am from the Kingston, New York area. It's a small city about halfway between New York City and Albany, New York on the Hudson River. Our area was hit pretty hard by COVID last spring and summer, and then very badly this winter again, because we have a lot of commuters to the city. So we got involved in what we called Waffle Church and had that for several years. It was basically messy church, but in the morning with waffles. It was a wonderful experience. And then as Roberta said, after we had a messy church training, we started having official messy church events in 2019. And those are my kids in the pictures. That's my youngest, Joshua, at Waffle Church. That's Andrew in the middle at Messy Church Easter. And then that's me on the right doing godly play during the messy church. We had a big start to messy church. I think because we began with an Easter event and because it's an urban area, we often would have 80 people, and it was busy and fun, and it was holy and special, but it was a lot to keep up with. And this pause during the pandemic is giving us time to think about, what do we want it to be like? What do we care about the most? What outcomes are we hoping for? And how can we do this safely? When we had to shut down last March, at first, I thought we would go online for our messy churches. And we did have 2 online messy church events with take-home kits. And I found they did not meet the needs of our core audience. Our messy church was about half people that I would meet through church and Sunday school and community events, and half families that I would meet through our food pantry and would develop relationships with. We had a lot of immigrants coming, a number of people who would speak Spanish as their primary language, and online Zoom events were not as helpful. So when our COVID numbers went back down last summer, we did start to plan our first in-person event. And this is me and a friend who was translating to Spanish holding an outdoor messy church event early last September. We had a Noah's Ark themed event. We were afraid about having a full event. So we planned a half-hour long outdoor celebration where we told a story, We explained crafts and showed what they were and had a chance to be together. We had a bubble machine, we had dancing, we had streamers, but masks were given out. We give people extra masks in case they needed ones to take home. And then along with the take home craft kit, we gave everybody the ingredients they would need to make ziti at home and to cook corn on the cob. And we gave them oranges, because in our local part of the Methodist Church, you are still not allowed to serve food. We're finally now allowed to give take-home meals, but we at that point could not prepare food and even give them cooked food. So we gave them everything they would need to go home and make their messy church dinner. Then we started having construction on our building, and we have not been able to meet in person since then. Now we are at the point of planning to meet sometime this summer. So I was hoping to share with you some resources that go beyond the basics. I'm going to assume that you will plan what makes sense for you in terms of masks, social distance, sanitizing surfaces, providing hand sanitizer. I wanted to provide links where you could find some other info that might help you think about kids in your community and their health, singing, aerosols, what you want your message to be beyond the basics. So let's start with that. If a huge component of Messy Church is the well-being of children and families, we need to know how many kids are getting COVID. How is this impacting them and their parents? So you'll see in the middle of the slide, since the pandemic began, children represented 14% of the total cumulated cases. For the week ending May 13, children are 24% of the new weekly cases. It's important to keep an eye on that and know what are the trends and how are children doing so that we don't contribute to any harm. And in the link that you'll find there, which you'll get when Roberta emails out the PowerPoint, you can see a summary from the American Academy of Pediatrics that's updated weekly on what the national trends are for pediatric COVID, but also you can download state level data and find out how is it going where you live so that you can factor that in. Also, I encourage you to look at your local or county school board's website and see, do they report their COVID cases? Where I live, our school district has a page, you kind of have to hunt for it, but it is there, that lists every single time there's a positive COVID case in students or staff and how many students are quarantined. And where we live here and in our particular population that we were reaching out to with Messy Church, that's a big deal, because if your family is either in poverty or on the brink of it, and your child is quarantined and can't go to school, and you don't have childcare and you miss work, how are you feeding your family? So for us, we're keeping an eye on how many kids are being quarantined, because we know that that may mean that their parents couldn't go to work that week. We've seen a huge increase in the number of families coming through the food pantry. It's close to 300 families a week now in a small city. So I encourage you to look at your school district's website and see what you can find out there. Because where we live, even if a kid has a cold or allergies and goes to school, if they have not been tested for COVID, their classmates may get quarantined for a time period, and then those parents can't go to work. So we can learn a lot from schools. Music is important to many of us at Messy Churches. And I wanted to share with you that music educators have done a lot of research now about how to resume sharing music. What is the safest way to go about that? So there is a big, interesting study called the aerosol study done at the University of Colorado and the University of Maryland. And they are studying how can you resume singing in person and also wind instruments. And they have 5 key strategies that they say you need to implement together if you are going to have music in person with students. And I think this could help us a lot with Messy Church. The first is masks, a well-fitting 3-layer mask. So it's important to have those available. So if somebody shows up without one and your church or your state is choosing to require masks, that you have one available for kids to put on. 6-foot distance. I think we're all pretty familiar with that at this point. But then here's the key thing, time. They found that it's important to limit your exposure to the cumulative aerosols from singing, shouting, or wind instruments to 30 minutes indoors or 60 minutes outdoors. When you're indoors and folks are singing or shouting or talking, aerosols build up and accumulate over time. And the longer the time goes on, the greater the risk is to the person in the room. So if you can lower the amount of time you spend in a room, you lower the risk to the people who are there. Airflow is the 4th factor they recommend. Outdoors is best, but you can use HEPA air filters and look at the air changes per hour rate. And of course, hygiene for your instruments, for people, for the things you're using. And there's a great summary of their report on page 2 of that link. They say basically to keep the risk of COVID infection below 10%, the indoor exposure to aerosols from singing should be 30 minutes or less. And that outdoor, of course, is better. So one way we're thinking about that at my church is maybe we think about pushing singing towards the end of what we do. Maybe we think about doing activities without masks at the end if we can't be outdoors. Now, here's an example of a great infographic based on that research. It says keeping arts ed safe at school, but you could use a graphic design program like canva.com to make your own and make it say, making messy church safer, mask everything, 6 feet distance, limit your time indoors. Let's try to be outdoors. Wear a good mask. We have hygiene stations where you can clean your hands. I think if we made graphics like this and posted them around our messy churches and also had graphics like, because we love each other, we do these key things, I think that would help us with our messaging. So yeah, you may want to think about meeting in one room. And then if you have 2 rooms to use, having a parade to a different room for part of your messy church and really ventilating that first room. That was part of our pattern at Messy Church, not so much ventilation, but using 2 rooms. We began in a fellowship hall for an hour with crafts and always a lot of community service projects. And at about the 45-minute point, I would start giving the heads up, time to clean up, time to clean up. And I would call people to where I was, ask them to come and get a rhythm instrument. And we would sing the song, We Are Marching in the Light of God. And we would have a parade. And we would go to the sanctuary and we would do godly play, singing and dancing. And the first room where we had been would get rearranged for dinner. And then we'd parade back in. So I think we're going to do something similar, but this time when we're in the second room, the first room is going to have all the doors open and fans blowing out to try to ventilate it as much as possible. So that's just another thing to think about. If you eat at your messy church, maybe make sure that's at the end. If you sing, maybe make sure that's at the end, or be outdoors if you can. We're in an urban area and we don't have a lot of space, so it's hard for us to get outdoors. I also am sharing a link to a really great interactive article on the New York Times where you can see how opening different windows, adding different kinds of fans, or placing air filters affects the airflow in a room and the risk of COVID being shared by a person who is infected. One relatively low-cost strategy is to open 2 windows in the room and have a box fan blowing out of one window. The other window is open. And then at a third place in the room, place a HEPA air filter. And this seems to help improve the air exchange enough to make a notable difference in lowering your risk. And that would be important, I think, as we get to times when it's raining and we can't be outside. I liked that Jillian talked about what makes you feel welcome now. How do we feel safe? Has this changed? I think this is going to vary depending on where you live and what makes people feel safe and welcome there. Where I am in New York, because COVID hit us early and has really changed how we think, part of feeling welcome now is seeing that you are safe, or at least seeing that people are obviously trying to make you feel safe. So we're thinking about that, not just the bright colors of Messy Church and the warm welcome, but signage about masks, hand sanitizer being used when you arrive. We are required to take attendance for contact tracing purposes. We will have open windows. If we need to have doors kept open for ventilation, we will have an adult station there so no child runs to the street. Those kinds of things are going to be important. Individual craft kits for families. We'll be updating our safe sanctuaries policy with COVID in mind. And we've also been thinking about needing some kind of t-shirt for our staff and our volunteers to wear that identifies them as, hey, welcome to Messy Church at Saint James, you're loved, or something like that, because we will be wearing face masks. And it's harder to know who somebody is. We had been using name tags at Messy Church that we would make with magic marker, but I think t-shirts are going to be important so that folks know, who can I ask if I have a question and I need help? The other thing we've been talking about a lot at St. James is that when everything comes back at our church, we want it to be simpler, and we want to simplify our message so that it can't be missed. The book we are using, which I encourage you to check out, is called Love First, a children's ministry for the whole church. And this has been a game changer for us. It has gotten adults who were not involved at all in children's ministry wondering, how can I have more time with the kids in the community and the kids at church? How can I share my hobbies with them? How can I stop what I'm doing and hang out with these kids more and do community service with them and be in intergenerational discipleship? It's a book about a small church that revitalized its kids ministry through intergenerational discipleship, with a real focus on community service, but also paring down their curriculum, slowing down, choosing what they taught very mindfully, and focusing on what they thought mattered the most. And that's important to me because I was noticing parents coming to Messy Church chasing their kids all over the place during that first activity hour and feeling welcome and feeling cared for, but also incredibly busy. And that's made me realize how important it is to slow down a little and make our message so clear that you can see it on the run. The themes in the book are that in the fall, they talk about love for yourself, that we're all made by God and all just radically accepted and loved. Then they transition to God's gift of love at Advent and Christmas, then transition to love for our neighbors, then God's gift of love through Easter, and then in spring, love for God and how we show it by how we care for others, care for the earth, we pray, we worship. But love, 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 love is through the whole year. Where is God in this story? Where is love in this story? And how are we personally helpers? And the real emphasis is on seeing kids as true disciples of Jesus with a real ability to alleviate suffering in the world. And this is how we are going to integrate the rest of our church into our Messy Church and our Messy Church into the rest of our church this year, simplifying it. I got the book on Amazon, but they have 2 years of free lesson plans and graphics on her website. So it's just been a lovely thing for me to see folks at our church who were not involved in Messy Church and were not involved in Sunday school saying, I really care about this. We had 14 families read the book and they're all getting involved. So I recommend that. Roberta shared, there is new research called Voyage of Discovery, Deepening Discipleship in Messy Church. This is research presented by the Church of England that focuses on how to work with families and also how to develop your Messy Church team. And I will also be using that as I work with my team to get ready for coming back. And next week on Monday, there's a webinar about it. So you'll find a link to their report. And on that link, you can register for next Monday's webinar. and find out more there. So that's another resource you might use. The other thing we're talking about a lot at St. James, tied in with that love first theme, is anxiety and mental health in kids and parents right now. And we're talking a lot as a Messy Church team, wondering, how do we help kids who have had so much anxiety and grief and isolation? When they come back to Messy Church, what will they need? And we are hoping to use yoga as a way to act out stories and to encourage breath work for working with anxiety. We're hoping to use journaling and artwork as a way to tell their story and integrate it with the stories of love that we share and see where they see God in their life or where are they struggling. And we also are going to remind our team that we need to be loving and patient, that our schools just reopened here. A lot of these kids have not socialized with anyone outside of their immediate family in close to a year. And they're going to need some support and understanding if there are behavioral issues as they figure out how to come back to regular life. And we're talking about, since our Messy Church used to get pretty loud, about having a quiet room available for kids who can't quite handle the sensory stimulation, or adults who might need that. That requires more volunteers for us. For our safe sanctuary policy, we need 2 adults in the room. But I think it's something we need to offer our first few times, because people may need a place to go just to chill. Last slide. So one of our goals is to talk about relationships and slow down. This kind of reviews some of what I already said, but we're talking about how can we stay in touch with our Messy Church families better, either maybe by briefly having some simpler events that are more frequent, just for a few weeks, kind of like a weekly VBS, or maybe by pairing them with a volunteer for follow-up. But we want to slow down. We want to stay in touch. We don't want it just to feel like a fun festival that they attend occasionally once a month, but like a place where they're really, really known and loved and have a deep connection. So I'm interested to talk with you guys about how that works for you. So this is some more of my family and some friends at Messy Church making marble runs. During our discussion time, I would love to hear what your priorities are when you think about reopening. Do you want it to be the same? Or like me, are you treasuring parts of it, but also wanting it to be different? And I'm curious, what information and resources do you feel like you need? Because I know for me, I felt like I already knew about 6 feet of distance. I knew about, sanitizing surfaces, having people wear masks. But where I was hungry for information was aerosols and music and social components. So those are some of the things we've been talking about here in New York. And at the end of the PowerPoint that goes out, you'll find my contact information. Feel free to email if you ever want to talk. We can set up a time to chat. That's that.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was very important information, and you gave us a lot to think about, I think. So it's great to have both you and Jill present, because we can see in all of Messy Church, you bring the gifts that you have, and that's what you use with Messy Church. And so it's really good to see the difference between the two of you and how you really complemented each other in your presentations today. So what's going on with you? What kinds of questions and what kinds of things have you done or that you'd like to talk about together? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have something you want to say. Don't all talk at once. How many of you have already restarted meeting in person? Have any? I know Trish, you started. Was that outdoors? You're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, we started, we've actually started and stopped a couple of times. Like,
Mhm.
I know a lot of groups have. Back in the fall, we had an October Messy church that met outside in our parking lot. We're in an urban area without much outdoor space, but our Messy church, our whole goal during the nice months is to meet outside. That was always the plan, was to be outside in our church parking lot. The first Friday of every month is our neighborhood is the arts district, and they do a downtown arts walk the first Friday of every month. So we move our Messy church outside during the arts walk and invite the neighbors to join us. So we did that in October, and we had a fantastic turnout. We had a lot of visitors join us. It was wonderful. And then, of course, the problem with meeting outside is that it's weather related, and we are half a mile from Lake Michigan. So weather here is extremely unpredictable. So then the COVID really surged here in our county. We're still one of the worst counties in the state of Indiana. So we're still being extra careful, but we did meet outside just a couple weeks ago for May. Not a real great turnout. The weather was terrible. And we had a couple of neighbors join us, but there wasn't a whole lot going on downtown. Like I said, being as close as we are to Lake Michigan, I feel like it's always windy. And no matter how hard, no matter how well you plan, we got outside and we got set up, and we're in the parking lot, and we're on the side of a great big 3-story building that was blocking the wind. We're like, perfect. And Messy Church starts at 5:30, and I kid you not, at 5:35, the wind changed direction, and we spent the next 45 minutes chasing everything all over the parking lot. So it was very frustrating. It was a very messy church because our supplies, everything was all over the place. So we're kind of learning as we go. But we have tried to meet outside. My team is a little bit frustrated. It's very difficult. I'm finding we launched our Messy church. We had our first one in February. And then the whole world shut down in March. So we had not had any time to establish our Messy church before COVID shut us down. So we've done varying. I had a couple really successful take-home bag. We had a great one. The first couple weeks of Lent, we had a great response. Others, I've had almost no feedback or no response. So kind of varying levels of success with the at-home Messy church. But yes, we have started again. We are planning for our next one in June. And then we have a really big, our big kind of kickoff will be our July Messy church. So, and that is outdoors. We're outdoors if the weather cooperates.
Trish, can
Yes.
I add? So Trish, when you are outdoors, like how Jill had individual families in their places, are you doing that, or are they moving around? How's that? What's your vision for that?
Well, that's been challenging, and coming up, in all truthfulness, coming up with crafts and things that allow for the 6-foot distancing and trying to keep, we do require masks. Masks, fortunately, up until I think this coming week, masks have been required in our county, so it's been a little easier for us to enforce that. Our church is still requiring masking at all times. What we did when it was successful in October, and then this last one that we did, we set up tables. I do not put out chairs. We have not done the meal component outside, but we did, in October, we did apple cider and donut holes. And my meal team had those all individually packaged. They came individually packaged. And families were pretty good about moving off to a space and kind of eating together. And I think we had 4 activities that night, and they were set up at like 8 different tables so that they could kind of be spread out. And we try to keep the activities kind of self-contained. Like we decorated pumpkins. So I had, you know, every person could get, you know, we had the little miniature pumpkins, and then they had paint and they had sequins and things that they could. So try and come up with activities that don't encourage too much. Like we used to always put out a big coloring sheet, like a big, you know, the big blown up coloring pages from Illustrated Ministries so that people could color together. And we've kind of done away with activities like that really encourage, you know, clumping. It just takes some creative brainstorming.
Thank you, Trish, for sharing your experience. Stacy wrote in the chat that they have done drive-through messy churches where people have come through when they had to sign up for a time slot. It's so great to see all the innovation that's taking place. So I guess I just want to encourage you to just keep trying. You know, I know it's been a very, very difficult year, especially if you just had started Messy Church, and then, you know, it's you know, I think it's important to realize that even if you have been doing Messy Church for 5 to 6 years, I think how Rebecca was saying, this is a time to rethink how do you go about restarting. And I think the whole focus on relationships is important. One of the things that came out of the study from Voyage of Discovery that was mentioned earlier from the UK is that relationships is very important, and small messy churches are very, very effective. I think sometimes in the United States, we think that big is better. We have to have a lot of people, a lot of activity, a lot going on. And really, it's in the small events where relationships are built that really leads to the forming of disciples. So just FYI. It's already 3 minutes till, so this hour has gone very quickly. Again, I want to thank Rebecca and Jillian for their information, and I will be sharing Jillian's contact information, if that's okay with you, Jillian, as well as Rebecca. I have some great news for you if you're thinking about restarting this summer. Jillian and our writing team, it's just got put up on the website yesterday, have come up with a Messy Summer Olympics, and it's based on the stories from the Hebrew Bible of Daniel. And I will be sending I'll be sending you a link to that so that you can download it. Don't get overwhelmed. She had 19 activities, and so you can do 5, or you can do 3, or you can do all 19 if you have a farm like they have in Illinois. But it'll be a great resource for you, and you are the first people to know about it, that it's there. So after this presentation, I'm going to be sending you the PDF copy from Rebecca. I'm going to send you a link to the Messy Olympics. I did want to let you know we are having an online getting started training event that is up on our website. Registration is up. Marty Drake, who's here on the call, and Crystal Getz are 2 of the 3 presenters that will be on that online call. And the other thing is, in October, we are having what we're calling Restart Messy. It'll be for churches that are new to Messy Church, and also those who are restarting their Messy Church. And we have 6 locations throughout the United States where we'll be back together doing in-person training events in 6 different locations on October the 23rd. So look for more information about that coming also. So I think that's all the information I have to share. Just thanking you so much for this time, and we'll try to do the messy blessing. I always screw it up usually when I try doing it. I had a Facebook friend yesterday said that she forgot the Lord's Prayer in the middle of an online service. So that's what I always fear too. But it's the messy grace is, may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ the love of God, and if we were together, we'd hold hands, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. So let's all do it together. You can even say it out loud if you want to. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. Thank you so much for being a part of our time today. And big hand for Rebecca and Jillian. Thank you. Bye-bye.